In industries where some employees are paid via piece rate, you need to make sure that they're at least paid minimum wage for the number of hours that they worked. So you may need to do a minimum wage adjustment in their earning. CenterPoint can do that minimum wage adjustment calculation for you if you set up the system correctly. To set up CenterPoint to do a minimum wage adjustment, we first need to create a minimum wage adjustment earning. So we're going to do that underneath Setup, Payroll Details, and Earnings. You'll see here that I already have one called Minimum Wage Adjustment, and you might too if you use the new database wizard to create a new database for your payroll. You might not be using it, but it might be there. So you can just edit it, and if you don't have one, you could just go ahead and click New. You'll need to give it an abbreviation and a name. The type needs to be regular pay, and the method needs to be fixed rate. You will need to assign a default expense account to it. Now, that is just going to be the expense account that gets used when you create a new employee and you assign this wage or this earning to them. Okay, you can always override that or change it on the employee level. Then each earning that needs to be included in the minimum wage calculation should be checked with this box right here to include it in the minimum wage calculation. So my employees that make piece rate work, some of them also get paid an hourly wage, so we've marked that, but then we've also marked all of their piece rate earnings as being included in the minimum wage calculation. Things that you definitely want to avoid to marking would be something like a payroll advance you wouldn't mark, or any kind of a reimbursement. We'll go ahead and close out of the earnings there, and then we're ready to add that earning to the employer if it hasn't been added already. So we'll go to Setup and Payroll Details and to Employers. We'll edit that employer, so I'm going to click Edit at the bottom there, and then we'll go to the Earnings tab. Again, on the top left, we're going to highlight earning, and down below we'll see a list of all the different earnings that we've got created. And if we don't have a checkbox in minimum wage adjustment, we'll put a checkbox there, and that'll add it to the list. I'm going to highlight it, and over on the right hand side here, we really don't need to make any changes unless you want to set up default profit center location project for this so that when it gets added to a new employee, it defaults it in there. But you can always just assign that when you get to the employee level. I'm going to go back up to the top and highlight earning up on the top left there again. On the right hand side, you're going to see a box that says minimum wage information. And in that box, where it says earning, we want to choose this new minimum wage adjustment earning that we created. Below that is a box for federal and state wage rates. And when I click on that, that actually came up on another monitor for me. So I'm going to drag that over here. You'll see that this box has the federal minimum wage rate filled in, and then you'll want to make sure that any states that you have where you need to make this adjustment, that you've adjusted the minimum wage rate for that state as well. Okay, now the adverse effect wage rate is used in certain industries, such as the agriculture industry, where they've hired H-2A workers. They might also need to make an adjustment, or the adverse effect wage rate might also be used in the minimum wage calculation. So in that case, you'll want to fill in that adverse effect wage rate. We'll go ahead and click Save on that, and then save the employer setup. And now we're ready to add that to any employees that we need to add it to. So I just have two. We'll go to Setup and Employees. And my first employee is George Aspen. He's a ski instructor and he gets paid per student. And so we'll edit him and go to his earnings tab. Again, just like on the employer up here, I'm going to actually highlight the employer at the top left there. And then I'm going to add his earning. This time, though, I am going to highlight the earning, and if I need to change the expense account, this is where I would do it. And if I also want to assign it to any default profit center, location, project, or anything like that, I can. So his is going to be the ski lessons for the profit center in the Colorado store. So we'll click save on that. And then my other employee is Frank Pinion, and we'll do the same thing for him. We'll edit him. We'll go to the earnings tab. We're going to add the minimum wage information or minimum wage adjustment earning. Highlight that, make sure we have the right expense account, and then put in the profit center and location information. So any management details that you want to default with that earning as well. And again, you notice that I am keeping the rate on that earning at 0. Okay, now I'm going to take the display and pay employees grid off on this one. I did not take it off on the other employee because I want to show you the difference between checking that box and not checking that box. Okay, so for Frank Pinion, we took it off, and for George Aspen, we did not. Now that I've added it to my employees, I'm ready to go ahead and enter in a pay run that would need to have a minimum wage adjustment added to it. So I've entered in timesheets for my employees. You could be entering in their earnings directly into the pay run as you calculate it without entering in timesheets. I'm going to go to processes into timesheets, and you'll see here that I have time in for both George Aspen and Frank Pinion. I'm going to edit just George here. Oops, I don't want to delete his timesheets. I apologize. I want to just edit them. And you'll see here that for each of his days there, I've recorded the number of students, but I also recorded the number of hours that they worked. So if you're entering in timesheets for any piece rate earnings, you want to add both of those columns there. You can do that with a right click and add remove columns, and you just want to make sure that you add both the columns for pieces and hours. And if you're in the agriculture industry and you're entering in piece rate wages for any H-2A workers, you might also want to add the column for offered so that you could enter in the number of hours offered to that employee. Okay, so we have the pieces of information necessary to be able to calculate whether or not they've been paid minimum wage. And so I did that for both of my employees. Now we want to close out of there and we want to start a pay run. I'm going to go to processes and to pay employees. I'm going to click new and then got my company, my bank account, my payroll sequence number. This is the third pay period of the month for us, and this is my pay dates or my work dates, 2/18 to 2/24, and there's my pay date. I'm just going to select those two employees that we have timesheets in for. So I'm going to move them over to the right, and we're going to import those timesheets. At this time, I'm not going to do any kind of overtime calculation. I'm just going to click import. And then I'm going to go over to the Enter Pay tab. Okay, so for both of these employees, underneath timesheet earnings, we will see all of those timesheet earnings that came in. What I do want you to notice right now is that for George Aspen, I see a line here that says minimum wage and it says $0 there. For Frank Pinion, I don't see that minimum wage line. So it's not cluttering up my list right now. And in fact, you're not going to be manually entering in anything into that line. So it's really not necessary to be there. And that's what that little checkbox for include in the pay employees, back when I was on the setup of employees, when I was editing the employee, when I went to Frank Pinion's setup, and I highlighted the minimum wage adjustment, I took that checkbox out of the display and pay employees grid. So that's what that does for you. It just removes that one $0 line that you're never going to make any adjustment to. Okay, now if you had not entered in timesheets and you needed to enter in the number of pieces here, you would also want to right click there, go to add remove columns, and you would take and add that column for pieces. And if you were an agricultural H-2A employer, you'd probably also add the column for offered. Okay, after we have all of our earnings in is when we're going to do our special adjustment. So we do that on the special adjustments tab. Now there are several different special adjustments and you can do them at the same time or you can do them individually. And in certain industries and certain adjustments, you'll probably want to do one before the other. For example, you'd probably want to do a minimum wage adjustment before you do a break pay adjustment. Okay, so you would highlight the employee and you could go ahead and click calculate. Now I could highlight more than one employee by holding my shift key down here and highlighting both of them and doing calculate at the same time, or I could calculate them individually. So it doesn't really matter which way you do that. So I'm going to highlight both of them and I'm going to click calculate. And I'm going to say that I do want to replace any current minimum wage adjustment earnings. So if there was anything in there currently, it's going to replace it. I'm going to highlight it. And you'll see here now that I have a line here for the minimum wage adjustment. Okay, and the same thing for George Aspen. I have a line here for the minimum wage adjustment amount. Okay, on the Enter Pay tab for each one of them, you'll see that it entered in a grayed out line that you cannot adjust on your own for each one of those. Okay, so that tells us that that was calculated by the system, and so it doesn't allow us to change it. Before I go ahead and finish out my pay run, I'd want to continue with any other adjustments I need to make first off. And then before I go ahead and post this pay run, you're going to go, of course, run any reports that you want to on it. But one of the reports that you probably weren't using before doing minimum wage adjustment is this one called Special Adjustments. And if I go ahead and preview that, you'll see it'll show us any adjustments that are being made in this pay run. Okay, and those amounts will also show up on the individual employee's pay stub, so they'll see a separate line for that. So once I'm done printing off those reports, I'm ready to go ahead and post my payroll and finish this payroll out as normal.